Well, hello, ALEC. I want to thank my great friend, Senator Jim. You could give him a round of applause. He is just, in so many ways, Senator Jim Buck defines conservatism in the Indiana State House. He's a man of integrity and a great and dear friend of mine. I'm deeply humbled. Abraham Lincoln said memorably that his only ambition in life was to be esteemed by people he esteemed. And so I'm grateful for your esteem. I truly am. But Jim knows me well enough to know the introduction I prefer is a little bit shorter. I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican, in that order. And it's my honor to be here at the 2022 ALEC States and Nation Policy Summit, the home of champions of limited government and free market economics in every state in the Union. So thank you all. Thanks for the honor to be with you. I know I'm the only thing standing in between you and your airplanes or cars home. So I promise in the 2 hours I've been given, followed by Q&A, that I won't go on too terribly long. But there's a few things on my heart I want to say. And first and foremost, I want to thank your National Chairwoman, Karen Fann. Senator Fann, thank you so much for your leadership. Also, I can honestly say I was for Lisa Nelson before it was cool. I mean, I met her years ago. Little did I know that she would emerge as really not only the CEO of one of the most dynamic conservative organizations in America, but one of the most important voices in the conservative movement. Lisa, thank you as well for your leadership. And I'm also told that Congressman Andy Harris has been with us today, who I served with in the Congress of the United States. And you're over there in the blinding light. An incredibly principled man and part of a new majority that retired Nancy Pelosi once and for all. Thank you, Andy. Wow. You know, I stand before you today as your former vice president, but I hope you also can see from that overly generous introduction that I stand before you today as a former governor and a true believer in the principle of federalism enshrined in the Constitution of the United States. I know how important the work that each and every one of you does every day. And I'm grateful that for nearly 50 years, ALEC has proudly fought for the timeless ideal that our founding fathers well understood. The states are not subordinate departments of the federal government. All 50 states are the foundation of freedom in America. The truth is, you all know and you prove in your own careers, in your own state houses every day, when states are free to lead, to innovate, to be the laboratories of democracy, America thrives. Our system of federalism was created in the U.S. Constitution. I look at the 10th Amendment of the Constitution more as an exclamation mark, because the truth of the matter is the Constitution itself is a document of limited government, of enumerated powers. And each one of you understands that at a deep and profound level. You also understand the wisdom of our founders built on that biblical principle that iron sharpens iron. So one person sharpens another. The truth is, when we have vibrant federalism in America, good ideas developed in one state can be replicated in another, and bad ideas developed in one state are not national policy. So I want to thank each and every one of you for being part of a movement, part of an organization, and leading in careers to bring that to fruition. Jim was kind enough to mention that I just finished writing my autobiography, the title of which is So Help Me God. I'm actually contractually obligated to mention that to you today. Thanks for getting that joke. You know, it's the story of growing up in a small town in southern Indiana, the son of a combat veteran, a first-generation Irish American. My parents grew up in Chicago, and we moved to a small town before I showed up. But from very early on in my life, I dreamed of someday representing my hometown here in our nation's capital. But I must tell you, I could never have imagined I would have had the privilege to be governor of the state that my parents had moved to shortly before I was born. And it would have been beyond my wildest dreams to ever imagine that I would have been able to raise my right hand to become the 48th Vice President of the United States. So on behalf of myself and my family, thank you for the privilege of being your Vice President. It was the greatest honor of my life. You know, I was inspired to the Republican Party by the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. Actually started in politics, as you may read. I don't know if I mentioned I did a book. I started in politics as a Democrat, but I heard in the voice and the values and the eloquence and the Midwestern conservatism of our 40th president what drew me to the Republican Party. It's extraordinary to think, as I stand before so many great state leaders, that Ronald Reagan said in his first inaugural address that it was important to remember that the states created the federal government didn't create the states. And Ronald Reagan was right. I met President Reagan as a candidate for Congress in one of those two elections that Jim was kind enough to mention that I lost. Thanks, Jim. No, I was in the White House. It was the summer of 1988, and I'll never forget it. I had my young bride with me. We were standing in line. The president was seated in the blue room for photo ops with candidates we'd been brought out. And my campaign staff, you know how campaign staffers are always handing you something to read or say. And it said something like, hey, we need a bridge, or we need a road, or we need a river to go under the bridge. And I looked at my wife. I was holding what the press team had said I should say, and I said, you know, this is the reason I became a Republican. I think I want to say something to him that I could tell our grandchildren. And my wife, Karen, just patted me on the shoulder and said, just speak from your heart. And so I walked into the blue room. I sat in one of those little gold chairs that are still there to this day, and I sat down and I looked Ronald Reagan in the face, and for all the world, I felt like I was talking to Mount Rushmore. I mean, he looked at me and he said, Mike, how's the campaign going? I said, well, you know, Mr. President, it's going fine, but there's something I'd like to say to you. And he said, well, go ahead. And I looked at him and I said, I just want to thank you for everything you've done to encourage my generation to believe in this country again. And for all the world, I'll always believe For all the world, I'll always believe that in that moment, the 40th President of the United States almost blushed, like he'd never heard it before. And he said, well, Mike, that's a very nice thing of you to say. The truth of the matter is, Ronald Reagan did change the country. He changed the country because he was a governor first. And he understood where the strength of America lies, is in the common sense conservative principles of every American in every state in the Union. It's true. And I was proud to champion that conservative agenda as a member of Congress, but it was going home to Indiana, serving as the 50th governor of that great state, that I had the privilege to put the principles that all of you work toward every day into practice. And I'm proud to say, with this tremendous support of so many ALEC members in the Indiana General Assembly, we passed the largest tax cuts and tax reform in Indiana history. We doubled what was already the largest educational choice program in America. We expanded health savings accounts to people receiving public health care. And we expanded protections for the sanctity of life and adoption reform in the state of Indiana. We did all of that with the support of men and women like you. I learned firsthand the vital capacity of state-based reform. It's really why it's so exciting to see the progress that so many of our governors today are making across the country. Governors can make an extraordinary difference in the life of our nation and its people in ALEC that come alongside our governors and put those conservative principles into practice that make it real. But the truth is, during my time as governor, I also was on the receiving end of dealing with Washington, D.C. Too often as governor of the state, when I would come to our nation's capital, hoping that somebody would be willing to listen to me, I literally would be rebuffed, not by elected officials, but often by unelected bureaucrats who would tell me how things were supposed to work in Indiana. It was, as that president I just mentioned said, it was as though a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital was convinced that they could run our lives in Indiana better than we can run them ourselves. But I'm proud to report under the Trump-Pence administration, those days were over. I took those experiences with me as Vice President of the United States and working alongside President Donald Trump. We worked to put governors and state lawmakers first every single day. We worked to move power out of Washington, D.C. and back into the states. That's just what we did. We removed nearly 25,000 pages of job-destroying regulations, more regulation rolled back than any administration in American history, creating new flexibility for policymakers in Indiana and Arizona and around the country. We established, as you all know, the governor's initiatives on regulatory innovation to reduce outdated state, local, and tribal regulation around the country. I'm proud to say we sped up approval for major infrastructure projects from 10 years to 2 years to build the roads to support growth in America. We not only cut taxes across the board for working families and businesses large and small, but we also passed legislation that limited the unfair SALT deductions that were out there subsidizing high-tax states for fiscal irresponsibility to the detriment of low-tax states around the country. 9,000 opportunity zones attracting resources and investment in states. We defanged the EPA that was driving up construction costs, raising housing prices. We signed long-term Medicaid waivers giving states flexibility to provide consumer-directed health care, and we gave states the flexibility to have work requirements in advancing welfare reform. We moved people from welfare to work in one state after another. And the list goes on, working in the coronavirus task force, working with state governors and state legislators. We launched the greatest national mobilization in history. We worked to open up our natural resources to responsible development. We achieved energy independence for the first time in 70 years. The truth is, whenever we were faced with the choice of trusting Washington or trusting states, our default setting in the Trump-Pence administration was to trust states and to trust the people, just as ALEC would advise. And the results were really astounding. 7 million good-paying jobs, wages rising at the fastest pace in 10 years, the lowest unemployment in 50 years, and maybe I'm most proud of all to say the lowest unemployment ever recorded for African Americans and Hispanic Americans all across this nation. With your support and innovation at the state level, we lifted 10 million Americans off of welfare and onto work. It was the largest poverty reduction in modern history. And real median household income soared by nearly $6,000 to a new record, more than 5 times the gains made in previous administration. The truth is, as my old friend Dick Armey, another great champion of federalism, would say, freedom works. And giving states the freedom to innovate and advance policies put America back to work. You know, my life has changed a lot since the last time we were together. Karen and I moved back to Indiana. We got 5 acres and a pond. I got a riding mower. John Deere, 54-inch deck, 0-turn radius, 25 horsepower. Some guys out there are turning green with envy. You know, one of the great things about no longer being vice president is you get to drive your own car. One of the bad parts is you get to pay for your own gas. And I did learn, as I shared not long ago, that, you know, you can be, Jim, you can be congressman for 12 years, you can be governor of your home state, you can even be vice president of the United States, but you're still going to wait 25 minutes for a table at Olive Garden on Saturday night. Fact check, true. So our lives have changed, but how times have changed for all of us. It is extraordinary to think in such a short period of time that the failed leftist policies of the Biden-Harris administration and their allies in Congress, America today is almost unrecognizable from the American that we had built together at the state and federal level in those first 3 years of our administration. Big government is back with a vengeance. President Biden has single-handedly crushed our domestic energy industry, caused gasoline prices to soar through the roof. Runaway spending on Capitol Hill, all in the name of COVID, passed on a party line basis, lit the pilot light on the worst inflation in 40 years. They're actually planning to expand federal land, stripping states of sovereignty over their own land and their own resources. Healthcare waivers that were signed in our administration, allowing for consumer-directed healthcare that respects the dignity of Americans in their healthcare choices, have all been quietly rescinded. And working-class Americans may soon be forced to pay for student loans for liberals who get master's degrees in gender studies. And worse still, at the outset of this past Congress, they sought to federalize our elections, mandating universal mail-in balloting and banning voter ID nationwide. So let me be clear. Election integrity must be a national priority in every state in America. I want to commend all those who have stood and strengthened election integrity in America, and we will never allow the Democrats to nationalize our elections. They've announced efforts to make it illegal for states to pass right-to-work laws. They even tried to prohibit states from using reserves to cut taxes for working families. You know, we need ALEC now more than ever. At a time the American people are struggling, not only an economy that's hurting families. I have to tell you, I was at a gas station in Hobart, Indiana, not long ago. A little mother pulled in, 2 little ones crawling on the back seat when she was filling up the tank of gas. And I said, "How are you making out with these high gas prices?" She said, we're doing fine. She said, "My husband's got a good job." She said, "We just have to go to the food bank twice a week." I said, "You have to go to the food bank?" And she said, "Well, you know, our gas budget comes out of our grocery budget, so there ain't more of it." But she said, "People at the food bank are real nice." Working Americans shouldn't be going to the food bank. Every single one of us has got to have a heart for families that are hurting in this economy. And we've got to recognize that the fight back has won us back to Congress. But every single day when you go back, we need you fighting every day for state-based reform in your states that will bring real relief to American families in this economy, that will deal with issues that are affecting their families on the streets with a rising crime wave. It's really up to all of you. The 10th Amendment says the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states or reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Own it. Live it. I mean, we've lived in an era now for decades of trampling the 10th Amendment to the Constitution as government's grown larger and larger. But you go back and remind your citizens, nowhere in the Constitution does it say that Washington, D.C. should dictate what's taught in the public schools in America. Nowhere. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that Washington, D.C. should control our health care, our elections, or state tax policy. I mean, the truth is, leaders in ALEC, we need you to lead the fight. I know the media likes to focus on the shiny object of national politics and the next election. But I mean to tell you, on behalf of the American people, on behalf of my neighbors and friends in Indiana, I just urge you to do the work now. Bring relief now. And the success in politics will follow. And the truth is, ALEC members have been doing just that. And before I close, I want to commend the efforts that so many have made. I couldn't be more excited. With Karen Fan sitting at my side, Arizona just passed the first universal school choice program in the United States of America. Thank you. I couldn't be more grateful. Karen, to you, to Governor Ducey, to the entire team there, because I truly do believe what began in Arizona is going to spread to states across the country. I mean, we all know the key to restoring patriotic education in America, the key to curing what ails our schools is simple. Give every parent the right to choose where their children go to school, public, private, parochial, or homeschool. And as we speak, ALEC has been developing model legislation to bring student-centered funding to every state in the country. Earlier this week, another issue has been addressed with tremendous support from ALEC that I want to commend. Men and women, I don't need to tell you that ESG is a pernicious strategy that allows the left to accomplish what it could never hope to achieve at the ballot box or through free market competition. ESG empowers an unelected cabal of bureaucrats, regulators, and activist investors to rate companies based on their adherence to left-wing values. It is anti-free market, it is anti-freedom, and it is anti-American. But I'm pleased to report, earlier this week, the Michigan State Finance Committee became the first state in the country to pass ALEC's model ESG legislation protecting state pensions from Wall Street money managers and their left-wing agenda. Thank you, Michigan. And I just heard today in the car on the way over here, today Florida's CFO announced that the state is pulling $2 billion from BlackRock in the largest anti-ESG divestment in American history. The truth is, every state should pass ALEC's ESG legislation. And I know the Congress will take this issue up as well in the new majority. But make no mistake about it, the enormous resources that are managed, state pension funds, has incredible leverage to turn back this pernicious trend among Wall Street money managers. The truth is, only the states working together can make the kind of progress that I just described, can push back against Leviathan in Washington, D.C., and restore limited government and the bulwark of freedom our founding fathers intended. And let me leave you with a cautionary note to men and women gathered here today who cherish the Constitution. You know, for most of our history, both political parties were committed to the ideals enshrined in the Constitution and a respect for the American founding. That's no longer the case. We live in a time when many on the left routinely demean the American founding. And radical progressives have sought in recent years and will continue to seek to rewrite the God-given liberties enshrined in the Constitution. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to keep and bear arms. I mean, the truth is, men and women, this generation of conservatives may be the last line of defense on the Constitution of the United States. It'll be this generation that decides whether we bequeath to the next generation that timeless charter of freedom that was our inheritance. Every one of us that serves in public office today, and members of our military, take the very same oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. We said we would bear true faith and allegiance to the same. We took the obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. And we pledged to well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which we entered. And it ended with a prayer. So help me God. And I urge you in these challenging times to keep your oath. Even when you're assailed by the left by advancing policies that are mischaracterized at the state level, as conservative policies often are, I urge you to keep your oath. Keep your oath, as the Bible says, even when it hurts. Enshrine in your hearts what our first president said. So we must say, the Constitution is the guide I will never abandon. Even as our nation faces historic challenges, I must tell you I'm incredibly optimistic. Because I know the American people. And I have faith. You know, during all my times of public service in the Congress and as governor and as your vice president, my opinion of the American people went up, not down. I'm reminded of that Bible verse where God asked young King Solomon what he wanted. And he said, give me a discerning heart to distinguish between right and wrong, for who is able to govern this great people of yours? What I loved about that was that he knew who he served and he knew whose he was. He knew he served a great people. And I want to say to you in these challenging times, never doubt that the American people are truly great. I've seen it. I've seen it visiting troops downrange in war-torn countries. I've seen it the way total strangers will drive across the country to help neighbors and friends in the wake of hurricanes and floods and natural disasters. I've seen it in the way that people rallied to our cause. In 2016 and again in 2020, we held the banner of freedom high unapologetically, and 74 million people rallied to our cause. I think the challenge that we face in the days ahead is just to have government as good as our people again. And I believe we will. Because I believe in the American people. I believe in the principles of the Constitution of the United States put into practice will create a boundless American future. And I believe in those words that have been over the mantle in our home for all those 20 years. In the one who said, I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. And if we will but renew our faith in Him and keep faith with our Constitution and the great people of this country, men and women of ALEC, the best is yet to come. Thank you very much. God bless you. God bless ALEC. Thank you for the honor of addressing you today.